Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of JT Talks Jobs. This is the show that teaches you everything that school didn't about job search and career growth. And today I'm really excited and a little nervous, I'm going to be honest, to talk about this subject, how to talk or not talk about sensitive news in the workplace. I'm very excited to say that she's back with me. And I honestly, when we thought about doing this topic, there was only one person that I really wanted to do this session with. And of course, it's Stacey Lewis. Stacey, welcome back, my friend.
Hello, JT. Hello, everyone. How are you?
So good. And so glad to be talking to you about this today. I was on, as I mentioned to you before the show, with a bunch of executives yesterday. Right. And we were talking about this need, this requirement of us now to be more transparent and authentic and accountable, that people want to know who they're working for. And not just, how they are as a leader, but they want to understand things. And I feel like executives are really trying to walk a very fine line right now. It's a bit scary about what you should share, not share in the workplace, how much of your personal positions need to be shared or not shared. I'll add on to that and tell you, just this week on LinkedIn, where we are today, hello, LinkedIn, I saw one executive, one CEO feature the article of another CEO where the CEO was saying, I have decided and I've made a mandate, nobody can talk about any of these subjects in the workplace, and listed the subjects and said, and if you talk about them, you'll be fired. So wow. Made the mandate. And this other CEO was saying, I'm not sure I agree with that, but my problem is I just don't know where to draw the line. I don't know what's right, what's not right. And that just further triggered me to say, we have to have this discussion today with our amazing audience in LinkedIn. We know that you are ready with questions and comments today. So Stacey and I are going to kick this off with a little context about where this is coming from, share some of our own perspectives given HR and managing people. And then we're going to open it up to all of you. Okay. I promise. But let me just set this up a little because, last week we had the trial verdict and we still see brutality and violence coming up with the police. So we had all that going on, but I don't want to just limit it to that, Stacey, because as I was telling you, another thing that came up to me is, believe it or not, the concept of the vaccine.
Absolutely.
And should you be asking your coworkers, whether or not they got vaccine or are they going to get the vaccine? Just recently, somebody shared with me their real fear around getting the vaccine, that they had an illness, but if they shared they weren't getting the vaccine because of the illness, now it was revealing something about them that they were worried would hold against them in work. So, this just opened up my mindset to so many things that we now just think it's okay to strike up a conversation in the office about and expect people. And I, staying with this vaccine piece, I literally heard someone in passing saying, it's your duty as an American. And if that was to be said in the workplace, again, how do people react? So I just, want to open it up and say, thoughts on that, throw it back to you. Let's first start with the things like the trial verdict. How do you think about that? And when you think about what should and shouldn't be said, what are your thoughts there?
So first of all, JT, thank you so much for having me. I know when we talked about this, I'm glad to be part of this conversation. And I think I want to share with everybody on LinkedIn. This is just a perspective that JT and I have. Looking around, no one's really having this conversation. And like you, I was a little nervous. Not nervous that we're having the conversation, right? But just nervous a little. Not nervous that we're having the conversation because I'm proud of that. Somebody needs to do it, but just nervous for people who feel that they're stuck, right? Now we've seen so often this cancel culture. You say the wrong thing and your career is done. Yeah. There is a level of accountability and you have to recognize where you are in an organization. We're not going to ever dismiss that. So as it relates to where we're talking about what do you bring in the workplace? First of all, we can all agree life and work is really integrated right now. That line is really very, very fine. We would never in the past talk about these things in the workplace because it would be more of a proactive approach, right? You would talk about it in a training session, right? You would talk about, but to just have a casual conversation. And so with that being said, my experience has been, and again, this is just Stacey, HRInterrupted, love a conversationalist, is we need to go back to have community agreements around conversations instead.
I love your phrase, community agreements. Can you talk about that more? Because I think that's a concept that people need to take to their own offices.
Correct. Community agreements, right? First of all, we're not having a lot of conversations. We've moved to Zoom. We've moved to emails, texts. And so a lot could be lost in that translation. So just talking, right? Just talking is something that we have kind of lost. I'm glad that we're going back because I'm a true conversationalist. But if you're going to bring, like, let's use the verdict last week. Last week was a difficult week for me. It really was. And I recognize where I sit in my company, HRInterrupted, and in my other company. And so what I did and what others did, they gave themselves permission to check out, meaning telling assistants, I'm not going to take any meetings. I don't want to take any phone calls. I just need to process. Okay. When you do that, right, as wherever you are, now you're with your authentic self. So my question would be, if I've told you that I just need some time, JT, why are you calling me and telling me, what do you think about the verdict?
Yeah. Exactly.
What is your motive?
Right.
And I think if people are honest to talk about, why do I want to talk about that? Why do I want to ask JT, if she's had the vaccination? Why do I want to tell JT it's your civic duty? Why?
Right.
And when you answer that will help on how you approach it. Yep. Yes, CEOs are accountable, and the workplace now wants to know. The days of being able to just kind of put out pronouncements and all of that and just hide, people are not going for that anymore. But transparency does not mean that you spill your entire gut.
Yeah.
That's not what it is. And sometimes I think CEOs or leaders feel the pressure. Oh, that pressure, I have to say something. You know what you can say? You know what? I'm not ready to comment on that right now. Now, that doesn't mean you don't ever say anything. You do need to say anything because the workforce is looking to you. But that gives you an opportunity to work within your council, right? To really say something that is impactful. JT, I'm going to be honest with you. There are times that I've had to communicate things that have contradicted my values to my core. But I understood where I was as a leader, right? And I went out and I communicated. Didn't compromise. I didn't put on the back end, but I don't agree with that. No, because I understood where I was in the organization. So with the community agreements and conversation, it goes something like this. Hey, JT, hey, listen, want to talk about something, but before we talk, whatever, just the agreement. We may agree, we may not agree. But what we're going to do in this conversation is we're going to hear each other. We're going to acknowledge each other's perspectives. And at the end, we're going to walk away with some actions that both of us can take away with. Whatever that agreement is in the conversation. But sometimes, JT, because I want to make my point, and I want to tell JT X, Y, and Z about the verdict, X, Y, and Z, and I want her to agree with it, and I want her to know she's wrong, you move into that space, and it doesn't help either party, right? The community agreements and conversations are really, really important.
And if I hear you correctly, and I think I do, what I love about this idea of community agreements is it's you checking yourself first and saying, if I'm going to engage in this conversation, I need to be prepared to hear views different than mine. I need to be open-minded, and I need to be prepared to still be able to work with this person and respect this person, even if I find out they don't think like I do. If I am not prepared to be that open-minded and accepting, then I shouldn't engage in this conversation.
That's right.
And I love that you're saying that, because whatever we think or feel is what we think or feel based on what we know and what we have and experience. Right. And trying to tell somebody they're wrong, it just doesn't work. You know what I mean? They can feel what they think and feel, like it just makes it worse. So
it's cantankerous. And to your point, JT, so there's two factions here. They're CEOs and executives who have an obligation to the organization. The workers want to know, right? That's one faction. And then there's the line conversations, JT and Stacey talking about it, do those community agreements. But CEOs are and leaders are becoming gun shy. And I think the same perspective matters. You know what? We're gonna talk about this. We are. Take this. If you're not ready, say that. The workforce would prefer you to say, you know what? In this space, this is really important. As important it is to you, it is important to me. And I want to be thoughtful and I want to be reflective, particularly if you don't align with, let's say, the general thought. I would expect that from a CEO. And then again, you align yourself with your board, the people around you. Hey, what is the thought here? What are we hearing, etc. But the pressure comes. You have to say something now. And then you get the whole the other side, JT, where people say, I'm not going to say anything else.
Right.
No, you don't get to check out because it gets hard.
Right.
Being a leader is hard. You don't get to check out. But what you can do is check in and move forward in the right space.
Well, and let's break that out, because you said it perfectly. We think about executives, we think about leaders. I think, and hopefully if you're a leader or executive listening today, I hope what you're taking away from this is take the beat.
Take the beat.
Take the moment and just tell people, I'm not ready to discuss it. I'm processing my own thoughts about it. When I talk, I want to be intentional. I want to be articulate. And I don't want to hide. It's not that I'm trying to finesse.
No.
It's that I really want to be able to say what I feel and make sure it comes across the right way. That is completely okay to do. And we want more leaders, executives, managers, when they're being put on the spot like that, to respond that way. And
if they're not ready,
gotta figure up, but take the beat, take the moment. On the flip side, though, now we have a whole bunch of you out there that are employees. And what we're talking about here is we've gotten to a place where we don't mean it intentionally, but we just strike up conversation and ask about current events, and ask about news, right? And if you think about going back to the vaccine example, we just don't even think about it, right? And so we're asking those things to be nice, to be pleasant, to be a human. And you said earlier, ask yourself, why are you asking this? Why are you engaging?
Why are you engaging?
People say, I'm just trying to be nice. Why are they taking it so personally? No. There's 1,000 ways for you to be nice.
And buying a Starbucks gift card is one of them. Buying a Starbucks gift card is one of them. You can be nice without getting somebody's business.
Yeah, and I think that's what I want people to understand. We're not picking on anybody here today.
Oh.
We're not trying to make you feel bad or defensive. What I'm telling you is there's a really awesome opportunity right now to think bigger and go, oh my gosh, wow. I didn't even think about the ramifications when I asked that. You know, when you're asking friends or whatever, it's one thing. But while that coworker is my friend, the environment has shifted. And I might want to take the beat and find the other way to strike up the conversation as opposed to putting them on the spot like that, you know? And so, I don't want people to be upset. It's just that you have to think bigger picture and differentiate friendships, personal life, and work life. Because as we said at the beginning of this, it's gotten really blurry.
You know, JT, I hope people are not upset. We're not telling people not to engage.
Right.
We're not. We've had a whole year of people not engaging. What we're encouraging, and I want to say I don't even want to say telling, because this is just two people who are passionate about what we do and opening up a conversation for others. We're just encouraging people to be mindful in that engagement. And then JT, we forgot there's a middle faction and there's a more formalized conversation, creating safe spaces. And I fundamentally believe at organization levels and some of the things that are going on, we should create safe spaces in the workplace to have these conversations professionally facilitated. So there's the executive level, right? There's that middle ground of those facilitated conversations, safe spaces. And then there's the one-on-one conversation. But in each one of those levels, there should be a level of thoughtfulness and mindfulness. And the other thing is facts. Right. I was especially at the executive level. The thing I was sharing with you, I had the pleasure this week to hear from an amazing thought leader, executive, one company, and he was just talking about some work in the DEI space. And he said that he was hearing in his organization conversation that you had to be a person of color, a BIPOC person to get a job, because they weren't hiring anybody else. And as the CEO, that hit him at his gut, it hit him at his core. Right. He said, I got to take it on the road. He had to be intentional. CEO, he's hearing that water cooler talk can't go on without being addressed. And so what he did, he took a step back and he went and got facts. And so he had an all hands meeting and he shared at the all hands meeting, hey, listen, I want to come out and talk to you all. You all matter. As it relates to our hiring practices, we ran the numbers. 55% of our hires within the last 12 months have been individuals who are not BIPOC. They're white. And more than half of those were male. Okay. So data speaks.
Yeah.
So now that you have that, now he moved into, so I'd like to know what is driving that narrative. See, he brought in facts. So the facts are now going to me, now the facts are going to speak to all of the thoughts. And then he really had a conversation. And I was moved by that, because what he did was, I have to address that. He didn't go out there and say, you guys don't know what you're talking about, blah, blah, blah. He is the CEO of the organization. Everybody expected for him to come out there and be thoughtful. He didn't offend. These are the facts.
Yeah.
This is what we're working with. And then he ended the conversation, which is something I absolutely say all the time and love. We are not asking anybody to remove their seat from the table. Mm-hmm. What we are asking and what we are doing, not even asking, what we are going to do is some heavy lifting and putting another leaf in the table, so the table becomes bigger and more seats can come around. And it left the people with hope.
Yeah.
And that's how you do it.
And that's thoughtful communication. And that's what we wanted to make the point of today, folks, is that thoughtful communication doesn't happen on the fly.
No.
Thoughtful communication is, I hear something, I think about it, I grab data, because I may or may not be right in the way I'm reacting to that, right? So he went and got data. Mm-hmm. He was able to pull it together. And even then, he took the bigger thought process of where is it coming from, and how might you be thinking about this is different from me, and let me communicate, what we're trying to make happen here. I love that. Really good communication on sensitive, news-driven topics, and topics like this, folks. It is not done in a split second. It is because it's these steps, and that takes time.
It's so emotional, JT. You and I were talking about that. Something like I was sharing with you last week. Some of these things that are going on are so emotionally charged. And so that's why, JT, I really want people, why are you asking that question? Are you just trying to fuel me? Mm-hmm. Right? Why in this moment is it important for Stacey Lewis to tell you what she thinks about X, Y, and Z? Mm-hmm. And because of the emotional piece, we have to really take a step back. It's almost like, and I use this now, it's almost like when you deal with your kids, they say don't deal with your children when you're angry, right? Some things that they do, you're like, okay, I'm gonna take a step back. I'm gonna get to that one, right? But you go in your space and you're like, and then you go back and you deal with it. We've lost that art. You know why? Because the proverbial I'm not saying it, I'm not making a blanket statement. I want you to hear my point. This goes back to when we started together in June.
Yes.
I want you to hear my point, and my point matters. And if you don't like my point, then there's something wrong with you. JT and I from June 2020 have said, the two of us together, all we do is bring awareness. And that's what this conversation is.
Exactly.
Awareness.
I love it. I love that you're bringing that point home. It's just, folks, it's not going to stop. There's always going to be, as we evolve as a society, which is exciting for me to watch, stuff comes up and we have to process the emotions around it and the things that are happening. I really believe that we are getting better at this. And I hope that today we're giving you some structure and some things to think about so that you can go at this more intelligently, more holistically, really just get better results, because you're not, jumping in too quickly. Right, which is what we want you to think about here. Think about that. And I want to, before we go and ask questions, Stacey, I want to turn and ask you something, because let's say you get asked a question that makes you uncomfortable, or you see a conversation is going in a direction and you know in your heart this person is not doing it from an ill will perspective. They are doing this thing we're talking about, which is they're just trying to have a conversation, but it's really uncomfortable for you to answer. Thoughts on how to respond in a way the person can understand, respect, that they don't get their feelings hurt and then take it out on you, because I think that's what a lot of people worry about.
Mm-hmm. I was just going to say, JT, we can, and we won't use names, but we could just think about on the national stage, a lot of situations where, there's been backlash of what someone said. Typically they flied off of it in the moment, and it was emotionally driven, right? And it was just emotionally driven. Okay. And so with that, and this is an art.
No question.
If that question is coming to you, and this is something that I work on often, I always work on how I show up, and I always expect the unexpected, right? And I remember former President Obama saying, always keep them guessing. I think that, and I don't think that from a negative perspective. I'm always in my mind preparing, especially because you can kind of get the vibe when a conversation is starting, right?
No question.
And I know people might think that this is far-fetched, but this is something that I do because of the space that I sit in. I typically will be asked some different questions. I'm already practicing on what this is going to be. If this scenario comes, this is what I'm going to say. That's not being authentic. It's being authentic to what I'm going to say, because if this situation comes, I'm going to say this.
I want it to land right.
I want it to land right.
I just want to add on to this really quick. Practicing what you want to say in the moment is not manipulation.
It's not
authentic. It is you caring enough to make sure that it gets said correctly. And I need people to understand that, because I agree 100% on that.
And I'm not practicing something fake that I don't believe. I'm practicing what I believe is how I'm going to deliver it to the person, so that we both can walk away from the conversation okay, right? Yeah. That we both can do that. And then what people don't use, JT, is silence. Mm-hmm. Silence is a powerful tool. Mm-hmm. Silence is a powerful tool. I would encourage if somebody's coming to you with something that, you maybe not be ready for, use silence. Mm-hmm. Don't say anything. The person is like, did you hear me? And you say, you know what? I'm just taking a moment to process.
Yeah.
Silence deflates. But you kind of sidebar, in interviews, when people go in interviews and it's silent and then they just keep talking. Sometimes in an interview, we're silent as panel members because you either knocked it out the park or we're taking notes. We don't use silence, right? And so it doesn't have to be a long silence, but whatever that is, silence is a tool. So I come to you, JT, and I say, did you get vaccinated?
Yeah. Right? Isn't that, imagine that. Hey, when's your vaccine? Did you get vaccinated yet? And the person's a deer in headlights. So if you know that you're afraid of that answer, you need to be prepared with something, because it's going to hit you,
I can say, and here's how you use silence. Did you get vaccinated? Is there a reason why you're asking me that? Right.
Exactly.
You see, I paused, right? Yeah. And then I asked the person, is there a reason why you're asking me? Is there a reason why you're asking me? And then questions, silence and question. Hey, Jay, is there a reason why you're asking me that?
Yeah. And that silence, folks, it gives them a minute to realize that they asked something they shouldn't.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So they quiet and they're like, oh, wait, she didn't immediately respond. Why is that? Why is that? And then she follows up with this. Is there a reason you're asking me that? I'm curious.
Right. I'm curious why you're asking. That's it. There's nothing wrong with saying that. But again, oftentimes my experience has been, I don't want to offend. Well, I'm offended that you asked me about the vaccination. So I'm curious. So I'm going to go back to you. I'm curious as why you're asking me that. Yep. That's a fair question. Right. And so I think in the conversations are two ways, but utilize silence. It really, really helps.
Yeah. And let's go to sensitive news. They come in. Did you see the news? Did you see that? What do you think? Silence. Right. What do I think? What do I think about the news? Just breathe, you can pause and give it back and just ask them back, folks. And people get the point.
It's a technique.
It's a technique. And I know that and people are going, can't you give us one that's not uncomfortable? Well, guess what? Welcome to life and communication, right? But
here's one that's not uncomfortable. Okay. I love that one. Here's one that's not uncomfortable. State your position up front. Okay. You're coming. State your position up front. You know what, JT? Typically, when you and I engage, we have this kind of conversation. You ask a lot of questions. Today is not a good day.
Yeah.
There we go. That is not uncomfortable. Now we've laid it up front. We don't communicate with each other and we don't let people know where we are. Today is not a good day.
I could even see saying something like this, keep using this example, Stacey, right? I know you're asking me because you're concerned about me, which I love, but I'm actually a little uncomfortable answering personal information about my health. I hope you can understand that and respect it. I love you so much. And I know you're asking from a place of caring. I'm just not comfortable sharing that info. Correct. Saying it like that works too. So everyone can choose their style. But the point that Stacey and I are making is think about it. Pick your style, practice it a bit so that you aren't caught off guard in that moment.
Right.
And that's how you'll be able to move forward.
I've had some people who in the early morning, they've come to my office and they've said, today's a different day. So I'm going to move accordingly. So that knows that I know that's not the day to come with a lot of problems. That's not a day to come with a lot of shenanigans. And as a leader, now every day should not be a good day, but sometimes you do need an opportunity just to re-gauge yourself. You can tell, and The workforce wants people to be transparent. As leaders, we feel that we always have to be on, but we do. But on is not fake. On is not fake. And people know when you are fake as a leader. Good morning, everyone. Not an email, whatever you Zoom. Good morning, everyone. I want to be honest with you as your leader. I'm having a difficult time. Last week's events have really have me in a different space. And so what I'm going to do is there's going to be limited availability with me. Please work with JT, but no, I'm there. I just need to impact you to be an effective leader for you and all that we're doing. I need to regroup. And I hope you appreciate that, because one day when you're a leader, you too will understand it. And I encourage you, be honest. People will respect that, as opposed to coming to my office and they ask me one question and I take out years of frustration with them.
Yeah. See, you just nailed it with that too, because again, letting the world know you need to take a step back is so important, versus if you don't do that and then you lose your mind and you go ballistic on them. Well, now
and then you don't have a career.
Right. And this is what we're talking about. And I just, folks, it's been so good. We're talking about so much good stuff, and I promise we're going to go to your questions now. I promise. But I just want to.
We have a lot of questions.
I just want to recap for everybody. Should you bring up topics in the workplace, please be really mindful about the stuff that you're just naturally asking, that you probably ask your friends. And I know it's well intended, but now's the time to rethink whether or not you need to ask that question. Ask something else. Find something else. If the topics come up, it's good to right now think about, if you got asked about some stuff, what you're afraid might get asked. We all know what our fears are. So whatever you're afraid might get asked, think about what we talked about today and the way that you would be most comfortable responding and managing that conversation. And then that last thing that we're saying universally is, you're going to have on days and you're going to have days where you need to step back. Be preemptive. Let your peers know, hey, I'm not in the best frame today. I'm just going to put my head down and do my work. But, sensitive stuff is going to need to just wait a day until, I'm feeling in my right place with how I want to express myself or talk about things. This is okay to do. And that shows real maturity and professionalism that will help you in your career in the long run. So I hope we've given you a lot to think about today with all of this. And now we're
one more, JT, we're gonna go to question, and one more in your last one, and then be allies for other people in that space. So JT is our leader, and she says that you as a lead, as an ally, don't get on the water cooler and say, well, what's wrong with her? She should be talking about. Say, hey, listen, everybody deserves to have their space. She is always engaged for us. Whenever we need her as a leader, she's there. As a team, let's show her that we value her contribution and let's support her. Have an ally voice, or you be that ally voice for the person.
Completely agree. And remember, folks, these are communications. People think what they think. Like, learning to manage your emotions around that. This whole I must be heard and I must be right is not a good mentality to have in the workplace. It's just not good. You've got to really have that.
People are not going for it.
No,
they're not going for it.
They're not. All right. A reminder to everybody, if you want to ask us a question, put the word question in all caps first, and then type out your question. And the team is pulling that into a chat doc for us. So I want to start with a great question from Cynthia. Stacey. Cynthia says, as a leader, how can we support team members when they are not in alignment with the company's stance on sensitive topics, right? Because, we're modeling the way you just gave a great example. We're going to have employees who don't agree with the company policies. What do we do? How do we handle that?
So my experience has been, and I think the question, and first of all, Cynthia, thank you so much for joining us today. My experience as a leader, you're always going to have people who are not going to be in alignment. But as a leader, it is my responsibility, right? I want to understand, to hear from them what their challenges are around that. But at the end of the day, I need to guide them to, this is where we're going to be. Sometimes as a leader, we start with, well, that's too bad. You need to. No. What, Stacey, when we talked about X, Y, and Z, and don't do it in front of everybody, right? Because they're going to give you, hey, I just want to try to decide, hey, listen, when we talked about X, Y, and Z, I noticed that appeared to maybe not, you may not support that being like, talk to me around where your challenges are around that. Hear them out, right? And then once you hear them out, whatever that is, you can say, use your own self. I just used my example. There have been times that, from an organization perspective, some directors have come down that, quite frankly, in my being, I may not agree with, but at the end of the day, my responsibility is to communicate, to communicate that and support that. And so that's what I'm asking of you, because at the end of the day, this, whatever that is the direction that we're going. Yeah. And I'm confident, right? Leave them with hope. And I'm confident that you are going to align with us, right? Then you start managing the behavior, because you have the conversation, and then all you do is manage the output of because you can't change ideology, but you can manage output, which is the behavior that they demonstrate around whatever you're doing.
Yeah, supporting somebody, I'm with you. I think, supporting somebody who has a different view than the company just means being able to let them explain their point of view and helping them do their work in a way that they can meet the expectations of the company and still hold true to how they feel. Right. So that's a part that you have to navigate. And I think that ties into, we've got another question here is there such a thing of a list of fireable topics that we shouldn't bring up in the workplace? I wish there was a list, but let me tell you something, it would be different for every company, every manager, every department. It's why we're having this conversation today with all of you, to be aware of the fact that you just don't know what's going to be the subject that literally is a thing that causes that.
So that's actually a great question. Who asked that question?
They didn't list their name. I know. I wish they had listed their name.
I named hers, whatever. That's a good question. Here's what I've done throughout the years, 35 years of HR experience. I really, back in the day, we couldn't talk about anything.
Yeah.
Being mindful of approaches are so important. That why question, I don't want us to look over that. Why am I bringing that up? How does it impact the workplace?
Love that.
How does it impact the bottom line? How is it going to impact our deliverables? Ask yourself some questions and be able to answer that. Then when you do that, you can say, that might not be something that we should have a conversation with. Here's where that gets tricky, though, JT. You and I talked about that. JT and Stacey are girls, right? So we're out at the El Torito. We're over a margarita, and I'm like, "Girl, my arm hurts. It's so bad. I have the vaccination." Girl, and you say, "I'm not gonna get the vaccination." Girl, you should get the vaccination. Everybody's getting the vaccination. That's us at the margarita, right? Then we come into the workplace, right? So those relationships, that's what you gotta be my. Now it's JT, my leader, and Stacey under. We've already had a conversation where about, the vaccination. And so it brings a different element.
Right.
That's why this has always been my position. And I know you're probably going to I'm very mindful of external relationships outside the workplace and conversations, particularly if you're in a leadership position in HR. You have to be careful because you are always on. There is no such thing as a conversation over wine when you have a certain position.
Yeah.
That one is, and as you're moving up, and we need to start talking to this is commercial break, JT. We need to start talking to those individuals who say they want to be in leadership. This is one of the things we need to talk about now. It is not for the faint of heart. And you're going to lose a lot of people because your level of responsibility, your span of control, your accountability is different. So you can't tell me over a margarita X, Y, and Z, because that is going to impact the organization. I got to do something about that.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's just, I was saying to you before it started, I have a real big fear that this cancel culture and this people not thinking about what they're saying and all this, and the reason we're talking about this, I have a really big fear that people are going to stop wanting to run companies. They're going to stop wanting to be managers or executives. And you know who's going to get those jobs? The people that shouldn't have them. Because they'll be the only ones left to choose from. I think really mindful, thoughtful, tactful people are going to run for the hills if we don't start finding a way for them to be comfortable, because they don't want to be hurt. They don't want their career to suffer. They don't want their family who they support to suffer. And so what you'll just get more people that are insensitive to this, that aren't good at this kind of communication, taking leadership roles because they'll be the only ones available. And I say that to put that out there to everyone. This is why we need to do this.
But JT, the pandemic taught us a lot of things. one of the things that also taught us is that anything is possible. One of the things that I would encourage us to do is maybe we pivot the thought of what a leader is, right? We put so much pressure on CEOs. They have a huge job, but there has been this blueprint of, as a CEO, as an executive, you do X, Y, and Z, and you dare not show vulnerability. We got to take that pressure off of them.
Completely.
And we have to take the pressure off of them.
Yeah.
Right?
No, I agree. And I think that's why we're talking about this, folks, is the more we start to create tools where we can do this, because again, they still need to be more transparent. There was a time where executives and leaders weren't transparent enough. And
they have to be accountable.
Stuff was going on behind the scenes, and
still have to be accountable. Right.
But we also can't swing it so hard in that direction that their whole life is an open book and opens them up to have their lives ripped to shreds, right? There has to be this balance. And again, it all comes back to these concepts of communication, which I love. So,
so to your conversation, how do we allow them, right? I think we take off of pressure, but also give them the tools or the fortitudes to be transparent and say, like I showed with the gentleman, the same gentleman was saying when the verdict came out, high-level CEO of a Fortune 500 company told his assistant, cancel all my appointments. I can't be on.
Yeah,
I don't want to be on today. That's authentic.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to talk to anybody. I don't want to advise anybody. I need a moment, and give them the ability to do that. Don't say, "Oh my gosh, there's Stacey. What's wrong with her? She needs to be here. If CEO got God forbid, hit by a bus, we gonna move forward.
Yeah.
Give them the latitude, and then CEOs that you all give yourself permission to be in the front of the line.
Yeah,
you have to do the same thing. You can't lead from deficit.
Yeah,
you lead from plentiful.
I totally agree. It's interesting because somebody's making a comment today, and they said, I don't agree. I feel if you're thoughtful, you probably won't say the wrong thing. And as somebody who I have never intentionally tried to hurt somebody's feelings, but I can look back at numerous times in my professional career where I have said the wrong thing. And it wasn't until somebody pointed out to me how it was being misperceived. Had I gotten defensive and said, well, I was just trying to say the right thing, that would have gotten ugly. I had to just realize they were trying to help me understand that came out wrong, that my perception of what I was saying wasn't on point with where they were viewing. And that's gotten me better and better at saying what I want to say. So I just challenge you all, you don't want to throw stones at glass houses, because there will come a time where you will say something and it was so well-meaning, but you completely missed the mark. And the answer isn't to say, well, I was well-meaning and therefore you can't be upset with it. That's not the answer. You still have to acknowledge you engaged. You said something. Said something. It got misinterpreted or interpreted a different way, whatever you want to talk about it, but you said something. And this is what I mean about my fear, is that we can't get to a point where people don't want to say anything or don't want to lead because they're being attacked or misinterpreted. It's a stressful scenario, Yeah. It's okay. So we've got some really cool comments here. So, or questions, sorry. So Publis New York is asking, where do mindfulness and self-censorship intersect? Interesting. Mindfulness and self-censorship. So, for me, I feel like I've defined there are certain topics that I don't want to bring up because I worry about the direction that those conversations will come from. I feel like that's me being mindful. And through that mindfulness, I'm knowing what to censor and be careful of. There's not a lot of points of view that I feel I have to bring to the workplace. I almost feel like they'll come to me if they think that I need to have a position on something as a leader. I don't know. What do you think? Do you proactively say, I want to make sure everybody knows about these things, or do you actually wait until people come to you with questions?
First of all, I agree with you. The first part about the mindfulness and the self-center. For me, I'm very similar to that. I'm really, and I guess it's just because of what I do. I know that my voice carries weight. I know the accountability that comes with that. I know it. And because of that, in life experiences before, to the person before, I've been as thoughtful as I had and said some things that have put people in a headspin. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I didn't mean that. And I'm thinking, gosh, so just because you're thoughtful. So for me, I I use a lot of silence. I really do.
Yeah.
And I really think, one, because I have a large personality. Okay, so that's the first thing. So even how I communicate sometimes can be off-putting to individuals. The more that the more that I am advancing in my career, I'm knowing that, like, I don't mind taking a little low for the situation, but also where I sit in the organization, my voice carries a lot of weight. And decisions and things that I say carry a lot of weight. There's a lot of responsibility that comes with that. And that's why I'm a huge advocate to say, I can't comment on that right now. Or I'm very transparent. I tell people who ask me questions, unfortunately, I cannot respond.
Yeah.
That's an answer, right?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I can't respond on those things that I can. And I've demonstrated that I will respond, but on these I can. And then also I'll say, you know what, that's not a conversation right now that I want to engage in. Like I do that. I say that's not a conversation that I want to engage in. It depending on the situation. Some people are like, oh, why? And I said, I don't, because they'll say why. And you know, I think about the situation, the person, I'm saying, because more than likely, right, I don't know where we will probably land on that. And I've even said sometime, and I don't think that's an appropriate conversation for where we are.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. And sometimes it just has to be called out because, again,
it has to be called out.
So they weren't mindful. So something has to be said. And I know that's hard for people to hear today. And hopefully we've given you lots of examples of different ways to say it, depending on your personality. So here's a really interesting clarification question from Clifford. Clifford, thank you for asking this.
Hi, Clifford.
Can you define, quote unquote, cancel culture? I tend to see this label misappropriated. You know, it's really interesting you say that because it's become a popular term. And I remember when I first heard it, I was like, cancel culture, what do they mean by that? And then I would see people using it in different ways. So I have my ideas of how I see it. I'd love to, what do you hear when you hear cancel culture?
I think Clifford makes a good point. In this contents of the conversation, and maybe it's not a term, it's just when somebody says something, right? There's this, I mean, we talked about this earlier, you know, CEOs are gun shy to say something because, you know, it's be on the news, they're going to lose their job, there's, you know, threats against their family. And so there's this like one and done. People are thinking, I guess I should say the one and done. Maybe cancel culture is not the word. It's one and done. Yeah. You say one thing and you're done. So Clifford, that's how I'm looking at it. And maybe cancel culture is not the appropriate term. So I appreciate that. It's a one and done situation.
Well, and for me, to me, this whole idea of cancel culture is that everybody is dying to negate all your experience, everything you've done because of one comment that you've made.
Absolutely. One and done.
I feel like in social media, there's become a lot of, you know, stalkers who are looking for the chance to take something you've said out of context or something you've said and blow it up, like you said, in order to have their entire work, their entire body of work and life experience completely canceled by that one thing. So that's how I've always taken it. So I think it's interesting because there's probably other definitions of it, but that's why I feel like it does work in this scenario because I am very worried about cancel culture for all employees, for executives, for everyone, that your whole career could be canceled out because someone decides to really call you out and get on you for a point of view. So what we're trying to teach everyone here today is just, again, think about what you're bringing in, what you're talking about. Even though you're well-intended, just it's work. Think about it.
What's the term that you use? The beat?
Yeah, take a beat.
That take a beat. Everybody who's listening, we should not gloss over that. I think sometimes if you just take a step back and you think, where do I want to land on this? We get pressure by time. We get pressure by people. You have to say something and then have your HR departments, whatever, be your allies. Something is coming out. We are going to, right? Because we do want transparency and the workforce is asking, we don't want to, we no longer just want to work for organizations who get to hide. We want to know where you stand on issues that are important to us. And I believe that is right. So since I'm going to meet you there, meet me here. Because when I come out, right? When I come out, I'm going to come out strong. So let me think. And when I mean strong, it's something that's going to be impactful for the organization of where we are in our true position, right?
That's it. And you may agree with me when I finally dealt with it, or
you may not.
And you're an at-will employee, and which means if it's not feeling right for you, you can go someplace else, which is, I think that's the thing that people need to understand is what you're opening up by demanding this new level of transparency, which Stacey and I agree should be done. But by demanding this new level of transparency across the organization, you have to be ready for what you're going to hear. And you have to ask yourself, is that literally going to impact your ability to work? It's a very complex situation. And Deborah here has brought a wonderful thing to light, Stacey, about where this heads to, because she said, I love my coworkers and it makes me sad that I can't be friends with them. But I've started to reach out to other HR pros at other companies to try to find peers and friends. But we have to be cautious in case we end up working together. She said, people who are in HR often don't relate to the things I want to talk about. So now it becomes a question, as she said, of finding kindred spirits. And that, I wish we had the simple answer for that here, but I think Deborah is bringing up a point that you're still going to want to find your outlet to have conversations about this. And it might not always be your friends or family, right? Because it might be sort of like career or work or topics, do you know what I mean, that they could care less about. But at the same time, we're saying you got to be careful about it being in work. So what are your thoughts on that?
For myself personally, I have about 2 individuals that are in my circle, in I have 2 individuals that are clearly there for that reason, where I said, I just can't talk to everybody. Right. And so these are the individuals who afford me the opportunity to get on the phone and professionally vent, personally vent, however I want to do that. Find an individual in your space that does that. I'm going to say this in complete candor. Don't blow up the chat. And then sometimes I talk to myself because I know I don't answer, but I sit in my car and what I want to say, I say. Nobody's there, right? And those are those intense conversations, right? Where I'm may drop a few, whatever, but that's at the tail end of it. And a couple of weeks ago, I had a car conversation, right? And I know people are probably laughing, where I just needed to let go. I didn't want an opinion. I didn't want to watch my verb tenses. I didn't want to watch my elevation of my voice. I needed to scream. So I drove down the freeway when I was going and I was talking to myself, right? That's just a little tip for myself.
Yeah, you and I are very similar because I too, over the years, have found just 1 or 2. So to answer Deborah's question,
yes.
I don't need a large network of people. You don't need a ton. Find 1 or 2. And the community, you talked about that, the community guidelines, I would go to those people in my life. They know when I'm calling them saying, I need a sounding board. You know what I need to talk about. I need a sounding board on this. And we've made a pact that that's what we're there for each other for, to talk about those work issues and have that support. But you don't need a lot of them. That's the thing. Just a couple, like Stacey and I said, so that, and then you have each other to rely on and it's perfect.
And JT, I don't want people, but also and I guess when I'm kind of going through my emotion with my own self, that's really enlightening for me because it allows me to calm down. It allows me to think. That's where I practice. Remember I was telling you those conversations I do a lot of those by myself and they work well. Yes.
It really does. Yeah. Wayne has an interesting question. Do you feel that leaders should use their position to force individual conversations or sensitive issues, even though individuals have a right to speak or not speak? Insert pause here. I love it. Do I think they have so here for me, let me kick this off. At least here in the US, anybody can run a business, right? Anybody can be in charge. I personally am very sparing when I use the word leader. I think you earn the right to be called a leader. I don't think you can call yourself a leader. I think people bestow that as a compliment on you. Okay. Do I think people in positions of authority, ownership, do they have that right to force those conversations? It's their business. So technically they do. Do I find it productive, smart, good at building a business, building trust amongst teams? And absolutely not. So do I agree with it? Do I like when it happens? No. Do I think it's a good strategy? Not at all. But do they technically have the right? They can. And this is what I mean about the fact that you might get hit with one of these unexpected conversations, if not from your peers, maybe from the top. So Wayne, you bring up a good point.
That's a good point.
Be prepared because it could happen.
So JT, let me ask you this, because you work with a lot of CEOs. You do a wonderful job in this space. Would you say that the why question would still apply to the CEO? Why are they asking? Would you?
Most definitely. And I think absolutely. I think you absolutely can gain clarification there. Yeah.
Yes.
So, wow, that's a really intense question. Can you talk me through, why you want to know the answer to that? Can you help me understand why that's important? Can you talk me through how that impacts my work? There are
There
ways
you go.
and people,
Yes.
I get that it's scary to have to ask to say that back, but your only other alternative is to answer and feel terrible about it.
Right.
To not answer and then they're angry with you, or to ask for clarification and help me understand, why this is important. And then that, that's almost like that silence approach. It can trigger the CEO to go, oh, wait, what, but also if you continue to see that behavior from them, understand that's what you're going to get. So because do you want to stay there?
JT, one of the things that I think we've talked about, but I want to leave, we're still talking about the workplace. So 99% of things we should have a direct correlation to deliverables and the bottom line in the workplace. And when you keep that in perspective, it guides a lot of these conversations. How does that impact my deliverables? How does that impact my performance? Right? If you focus on the workplace, yes, it has expanded and things have happened, but we're still talking about the workplace. And I think sometimes that vision or that piece might get lost in translation.
Yeah,
we're still talking about work.
Yeah, exactly. That's what we're trying to really drive home here. Jessica says, hello, great information so far. Thank you, Jessica. How do we decide what to communicate so it doesn't give the air that we are picking sides? Also, who does the communication? Is it HR or the executive team? What do you think?
How do we communicate? Okay, so clearly, depending on what the message is, I'm all about the executive. The voice has to, it has to come from the top, right? Yeah. I will say through the last year, for so many people that I've had the pleasure to engage in and work with, those messages came from the top, right? People already have a notion about, now HR can come back with some actions. We heard from JT, she said X, Y, and Z. This is what we are going to put in action. But the initial messaging, it has to, don't nobody care. We don't care what I don't want to say it like that, JT, but don't nobody care what HR feels about this. We want to know what JT, CEO, feels about this position, because as you just said, it's your company. So I'm working for you. How do you land on this? HR is here to support you and to put those things in action, but we want to hear from you. The picking sides is an interesting one, because how do you communicate that you're not picking sides?
That's I agree with you. I think that's so tricky, and I love Jessica asked that question.
Yeah.
The thing is I think it's more important for me personally I'm not picking sides, but I will tell you what I believe in and what I hope I want to see happen in the world. So I feel like I can share that and say, this is what I want to see happen. This is what I believe is right. And again, bring it back to, does it impact us at work? Is this, like you said, so here's what we're going to do as it impacts work. And let me give you a great example. Last year, when everything went down with Black Lives Matters, right? So many companies were just jumping on and throwing up on social media. We support, right? Just couldn't wait to jump on the news cycle train, right? My amazing team, which by the way, the majority of them are a lot younger than me and very involved in, in issues, which I love. They too wanted to put something together. So what can we put together? How do we put out our stance and work it daily? And I said, there's so much information going on right now. We don't need to just jump on and be part. What I would like to do, take a beat, take it all in. And what I want us to do as a company to decide, how does this impact us, and what can we do as a business to have impact?
Correct.
Because we're not hiring 1,000 people. So we can't be one of the ones that focuses in on their hiring, right?
Right.
And we do. So we put together something that said, we are taking it all in. It was basically, we're taking it in, we're taking a beat. And you saw that. You were one of the ones that saw that. And then we had 2 company meetings where we said, what resources do we have? What are we good at? What do we think we can do? And out of that came these sessions with you. So that's where I'm very proud of my team.
Yes.
And as the leader, I had to take that moment and say, I'm not picking sides.
Right.
I'm taking in information, and we're going to figure out what is right, what the company can do that is right. And that's it, right? Never in there did I have to come out and say, I support this cause or this group or that group. It was actions. that spoke to what we are as a company. And that's what I hope that more people do. I don't know. Does that make sense?
JT, what a wonderful way to end that. And to Jessica, that is exactly what JT's group did. And I was on Instagram and I was moved. I was moved by their authenticity to say, you know what? We don't know what we don't know. And we're not going to just jump on the bandwagon to put something up to say that we did something. And the post was very, very thoughtful. And so I wrote in and I said, first of all, I applaud you. I applaud you. Second of all, here's some things to consider as you are having these team conversations, right? I remember that. And so you're exactly right. That's all that we're talking about.
Yeah.
Think where are we trying to land and not succumb to pressure.
Yeah.
That does not mean you do not move and you do not move to action. JT and I will never say that, but move to the right action.
Yeah.
I'll never get, as we're closing, I've had so many wonderful professional advice. One of my mentors, she gave me this advice. She said, Stacey, you have the makings to be an extraordinary executive. Moving forward, from this day forward, unless it's illegal, it's going to cause immediate harm or danger. When something comes to you, I want you to sit on it for 24 hours.
Yeah.
That's what happens at the executive level, because sometimes things work themselves out. A lot of times you don't have enough information. Sit on it for 24 hours. Don't get an analysis paralysis and think things through. Ask questions. And 9 times out of 10, you will land on the right side.
Yeah.
Team, from that advice, I've put that into my personal life. And I'm telling you, I'm grateful and I'm humble. By that advice, I've been able to do some extraordinary things of not just moving in action, solving, changing, coming to support, but saying, let's take a step back.
Yeah.
And let's do something right.
I love that. And I think that wraps up what we're talking about nicely here, folks. The better you get at doing this, you're going to spot it in others.
That's
right? Stacey and I, we all found each other because we could see that there was thoughtful and intentional communication. And if all of us start to do this, you will see it. You will recognize it in others. And those will be the people that you will network and connect with. Compliment them. Tell people when you see them doing it right, doing it the way we're talking about today, because that's how you'll build those relationships. For Marcella and some of the others who are asking, where can you get more resources on this? So first of all, you should all be following Stacey. So Stacey, tell everyone where they can follow you.
So you can find me on social media, on all social media platforms at HRInterrupted. And then also, as you said the last time, please hit me up on LinkedIn. Oftentimes I get a lot of requests, and so I will get back to you. I have to talk about this, but if you want to continue this conversation, I would, JT. I think that this is impactful.
Yeah.
People want to know this. I believe people genuinely want to not make mistakes, but we don't want people to feel paralyzed. You might make a mistake. Apologize.
Yeah.
Don't be defensive. Just say, you know what? That was not my intention. Acknowledge the person's feelings. Don't make them feel like they're crazy because they said that to you or there's something wrong. Say, that was not my intention. But be thoughtful of how you communicate and ask yourself the question, why? Why do I want to know this? Why do I want to have that conversation? So hit me up, LinkedIn.
Absolutely. And you know what? We'll be paying a lot more attention to that this year because there are consulting resources for your companies that you can access. Things that you could do like lunch and learns where you could have a discussion like this one with your peers. I just think that this stuff is super important. I know that not every company has a diversity, equity, inclusion specialist or department. Big companies do, little ones don't. Hence why we're here every month, Stacey and I talking to you. So we're just glad that you found the session helpful. All of you, be proud of yourselves. This was a difficult conversation and you sat here for an hour and listened to it. That means something. And if you go out and use this information and have more meaningful conversations, there's a ripple effect. That's what we're trying to make happen here. So thank you for doing your part and going out there and being more mindful with these types of communications. We appreciate you. We love you. And we will see you all next month. Right, Stacey?
We will. Thank you guys so much. We see everyone. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.